So, how do you build a global gaming empire pretty much from nothing? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating story of disruption, how that smartphone in your pocket totally upended the video game industry in a place you probably wouldn't expect: Turkey. This question, which was actually asked by a gamer in Turkey, kind of gets to the heart of this long-held belief. For years, the general idea was that all the good games were made somewhere else. But what if that was just completely wrong?
Well, plot twist, they are being made there. The game, 1010, a massive global hit with over 50 million downloads, was actually developed by a Turkish studio. This one little fact points to a huge, almost hidden transformation in the country's tech scene. So you gotta wonder, how on earth did this happen?
To really get the scale of this change, we have to rewind the clock a bit. Let's take a look at what the Turkish gaming world was like before the smartphone changed everything. And honestly, the picture is pretty bleak. Get this. Over a 25-year period, from 1980 all the way to 2005, researchers found that fewer than 25 video games were commercially made in the entire country. The industry was basically non-existent. Okay, now let's jump to today. The Turkish video game market has just exploded, now worth around $850 million. But here's the crazy part. For the longest time, almost none of that money was actually going to local developers. So where was all that cash going? Well, if you look at the data from 2015, it reveals this shocking imbalance. Local game makers were earning just 5% of the revenue from their own home market. People were playing games, but they weren't playing local ones. Something big had to give. And that big something was a global tech shift that would completely level the playing field in a way nobody really saw coming: the rise of mobile gaming. To really understand what happened, we need to quickly touch on this key business idea: disruptive innovation. This isn't just about making something a little bit better. It's about creating an entirely new market with new rules, new players, and, well, huge new opportunities. So how did mobile do this? Well, it just completely changed the math of making a game. Unlike those giant console or PC titles, mobile games could be made with way smaller budgets. They had more bite-sized content, and you could build them with tiny, scrappy teams. All of a sudden, those huge barriers to getting in the game, they were just gone. And a massive part of this was what you could call the democratization of the tools themselves. These incredibly powerful game engines, things like Unity and Unreal, they basically became free or super affordable. This put world-class software into the hands of anyone with a laptop and a great idea. It was a total game changer. So this huge tech disruption didn't just change the tools, right? It forced everyone to throw out the old business playbook and write a completely new one for making and selling games. I mean, the entire philosophy of how you make a game got turned on its head. The old, slow, corporate way of doing things that was so focused on production, that was out. The new way was all about being fast, agile, having a startup mindset, and being obsessed with marketing. And the budgets completely flipped. One developer said that while their mobile games cost up to 70% less to make, they had to spend that much more on marketing. It makes sense, right? In a super crowded app store, if people can't find you, you don't exist. This quote from a Turkish developer just perfectly captures the insane pressure of this new market. You could work for a year on a game, and it could be old news in a week, replaced by something someone else knocked out in a month. This relentless pace, it created a huge problem: burnout. Not just for the developers, but for their investors too. So this disruption didn't just change how games were made. It also totally redefined who was playing them. And it brought a whole new set of challenges and threats for developers to deal with. See, back in the old PC and console days, the biggest threat to making money in Turkey was piracy. People would just illegally copy games, and the developers would never see a dime for their work. But with mobile, a new, maybe even more dangerous threat popped up: clone games. Because a lot of mobile games have really simple mechanics, a rival could easily copy your hit game, put some new art on it, and release a clone that steals all your thunder and your revenue. And this threat of clones was made so much worse by the new mobile gamer. We're talking about a massive new audience that had basically zero brand loyalty. They're just looking for fast fun, they expect games to be free, and the second they hit a paywall, they're gone, on to the next free game. As you can imagine, trying to make money from this crowd is incredibly tough. So the mobile revolution was brutal. It forced the Turkish industry to either adapt or disappear. But tech never, ever stands still. So what's the next big disruptive wave coming over the horizon? Well, there's a pretty strong consensus among the experts that the next big thing is going to be driven by augmented and virtual reality. But what's really fascinating is that nobody seems to agree on what happens to today's casual mobile players. Will they evolve and become more serious, hardcore gamers? Or will they just get bored and abandon gaming altogether? The jury is definitely still out on that one.
And that brings us to the final, really crucial question. The developers who made it through the chaos of the mobile boom were forged in a trial by fire. They learned incredibly hard lessons about being agile and about marketing. So, has that brutal experience given them the strength not just to survive the next wave of change, but to actually lead it? Now that is the billion-dollar question.